She wanted to pretend it never happened. But how do you forget the moment that changes everything? The office had gone quiet hours ago. Most of the building was dark, save for a few scattered lamps that glowed like lonely islands across the rows of empty desks. My computer screen was the only light left on our floor, its pale glow mixing with the amber hue of the desk lamp by my side. I told myself I was just finishing one more report, but the truth was I didn't want to go home just yet. There was something oddly peaceful about the silence after everyone had left. That's when I noticed I wasn't alone. Across the room, behind the frosted glass of her office, I saw the faint outline of my boss. She was still working too, shoulders slightly hunched, her head tilted down in concentration. For a moment, I just watched. She always carried herself with such composure during the day, her voice measured, her steps decisive. But here, in the dim after-hours glow, she looked almost softer. More human. Eventually, I got up to bring a stack of sorted files to her. I hesitated at her door, lightly knocking before stepping inside. The smell of her perfume lingered faintly in the room, warm and elegant, mingling with the sharper scent of ink and paper. "You're still here," I said, my voice sounding too loud against the quiet. She looked up, surprised, and then smiled faintly, not her usual professional smile, but something more tired, more genuine. "So are you," she replied. I set the folder on her desk. She reached for it at the same time I did, and that's when it happened. Our hands met in the middle, skin brushing against skin. For a second, either of us moved. Her fingers pressed lightly over mine, not intentionally, but not withdrawn quickly either. The contact was brief, yet it burned with a quiet intensity that neither of us could ignore. The hum of the air conditioner seemed louder. The lamp beside her cast long shadows across the room. My pulse kicked in my throat as I glanced up, only to find her eyes already on mine. There was no authority in her gaze in that moment, no distance of titles or hierarchy. Instead, there was something searching, uncertain, and achingly real. Her hand finally slipped away, leaving behind the faint memory of warmth against my skin. I cleared my throat, pretending to shuffle the papers, but my thoughts were far from orderly. Every detail about her seemed sharper now, the curve of her wrist as she adjusted her pen, the way a strand of hair had fallen loose from the bun she'd pinned it in, the faint crease of fatigue around her eyes that only made her look more beautiful in a way I'd never dared to acknowledge before. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling softly, and for just an instant I thought I saw a flicker of vulnerability cross her face. It vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual calm. But I'd felt it, in her touch, in her silence. Something had shifted between us, something that couldn't be neatly filed away like the papers on her desk. And deep down, I knew, this was not a moment I could ever forget. The air between us still carried the weight of that accidental touch. I could feel it lingering, a warmth pressed into my skin even after her hand had slipped away. I busied myself with the stack of files, pretending to align them neatly, but I was only buying time to steady my breath, to disguise the way my chest had tightened. She was the first to speak. Her voice, when it came, was softer than I expected. "We'll forget this tomorrow." She said it with a quiet certainty, the way one might declare the sky is blue or the office opens at 9. It was supposed to sound final, like a rule laid down, clear and unbending. But her tone betrayed her. It wasn't the confident voice she used in meetings, or the sharp one she used when cutting through excuses. It wavered ever so slightly, as if the words cost her something. I looked up. She was already looking away. Her gaze fixed on the pen she rolled absently between her fingers. The gesture was too deliberate, a careful distraction. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "We'll forget," she repeated, softer this time, almost to herself. But if she really believed that, she wouldn't need to say it twice. I studied her in the dim light. Her posture was as composed as ever, back straight, shoulders squared, but her small tells were impossible to miss. She toyed with the chain of her necklace, twisting it lightly before letting it fall back against her collarbone. She only did that when she was uneasy. I'd worked with her long enough to recognize it. In that moment, I understood. She wasn't telling me to forget for her sake. She was trying to protect both of us. Protect me from the risks of office whispers, protect herself from the vulnerability she never let anyone see. The lines of her face held authority, but her eyes carried something else entirely. For a long moment, the silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on her wall, the hum of the air conditioning, even the rustle of paper as she shifted the file just slightly away from us, as if pushing the memory out of reach. I should have nodded, agreed, let the moment dissolve into the quiet of the office night. That's what she wanted. That's what was safe. But as I stood there, I couldn't bring myself to accept it. Because forgetting meant pretending the spark I felt wasn't real. Forgetting meant ignoring the truth I saw reflected in her hesitation. I stayed quiet, not daring to contradict her yet. My hands remained at my sides, but my chest ached with the words I hadn't spoken. She didn't know it yet, but I couldn't simply erase what had just happened. The room smelled faintly of her perfume, warm and floral, clinging to the air between us. My pulse thudded against my ribs as she finally set her pen down with a soft click. She exhaled, a long, weary breath, and for a fleeting instant I saw her shoulders drop, a rare crack in the armor she wore so well. "We'll forget this tomorrow," she said once more, this time more firmly, as though repeating it could make it true. But the tremor in her voice told me everything. She didn't believe it any more than I did. Her words still echoed in the room. "We'll forget this tomorrow." They hung there like a fragile curtain between us, something I could step through or retreat from. My heart was pounding, but I knew if I stayed silent, the moment would vanish into the night, swallowed up by hesitation. So I spoke. "Not a chance," I said quietly. The words weren't loud, weren't defiant. They came out soft, almost a whisper, but they carried a weight I couldn't hide. She froze. The pen she had just set down rolled a few inches across the desk, stopping against a folder. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time all evening, she held the look without breaking away. There was surprise there, maybe even a flicker of alarm, but beneath it, something else glimmered. Something unspoken. "You..." She trailed off, shaking her head slightly, as if she hadn't heard me right. I swallowed, grounding myself before I repeated it. "I can't forget this. Not tomorrow. Not ever." The words left me bare, exposed in a way that terrified me. But strangely, I didn't regret them. Her lips parted, but no answer came. Instead, she inhaled sharply and pressed her palm flat against the desk, grounding herself with the gesture. I could see the faint tremor in her hand, betraying what her expression worked so hard to conceal. Silence stretched out again, but this silence was different. It wasn't the avoidance of before. It was alive, charged, like a storm waiting to break. I felt my chest rise and fall too quickly, every breath heavy with the gravity of what I'd admitted. I half expected her to remind me who she was, my boss, older, untouchable. To cut me off with authority, to dismiss me with that professional sharpness she wielded so easily in the boardroom. But she didn't. Her voice, when it finally came, was softer than I'd ever heard it. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do," I replied, steady this time. My tone surprised me, not reckless, not boyish, but sure. Honest. "You want this to disappear, but I can't pretend it didn't happen." "I won't." Her gaze softened, though she tried to fight it. I saw her lips press into a line, then part again, only to hesitate. She looked down, her hand brushing over a stack of papers without purpose, as if shuffling them could distract her from what hung between us. I wanted to reach for her hand again, to reassure her, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I let the weight of my words settle. The quiet hum of the office wrapped around us, the air conditioning, the faint buzz of a light overhead, the distant city sounds outside the glass. Everything felt suspended, waiting for her to decide how this moment would end. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Her eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened, there was no anger. No reprimand. Only conflict, written clearly across her face. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But in the silence that followed my refusal, I knew one thing for certain. She wasn't forgetting either. We left the office together in silence, the weight of everything unspoken following us down the dimly lit hallway. The building had gone still for the night, no voices, no footsteps but our own. Our shoes echoed against the polished floor, each step a reminder of how close we walked, and how close we didn't dare to be. The glass doors opened with a soft hiss, and cool night air rushed in. The city greeted us with its usual hum, distant traffic, a flicker of neon signs, the low murmur of life continuing just beyond reach. After the stale, conditioned air of the office, the outside felt sharp, alive. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, her movements graceful but hurried, as if shielding herself not just from the chill but from the fragile moment we'd just shared. I fell into step beside her, careful to match her pace, close enough to feel the faint sway of her presence yet leaving her the space she seemed to need. For a while, we didn't speak. But silence has a way of pressing harder the longer it lasts. Finally, I broke it. "You always work this late." My voice came out lighter than I felt, an attempt to make the night ordinary. She gave a small smile, eyes still forward. "Only when there's too much to do. Or too much to think about." The honesty in that second half caught me off guard. She rarely let personal truths slip through. I glanced at her, studying the way her profile looked under the streetlight, composed, yes, but softened by fatigue, touched by a quiet vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. "What about you?" she asked after a pause. "Why stay?" I shrugged, hands deep in my pockets. "Sometimes it's easier than going home." She looked at me then, a brief but searching glance, as though she wanted to ask more but thought better of it. Instead, she let the conversation drift to safer ground, books she'd been reading, a song she'd heard recently, the quiet regret of not learning piano when she had the chance. Her voice grew lighter as she spoke, freer. She wasn't my boss in those moments. She was simply a woman sharing pieces of herself beneath the city's muted glow. I listened, not just to her words but to the rhythm of them, to the warmth that surfaced when she let her guard slip. A breeze stirred her hair, sweeping a loose strand across her face. Without thinking, I reached out, brushing it gently aside. My fingers barely grazed her temple, but the contact sent a quiet jolt through me. She didn't step back. She only lowered her gaze, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles, shy, almost reluctant, but real. We kept walking, our shadows trailing side by side along the pavement. Every streetlight we passed seemed to hold us briefly in a small circle of gold before letting us slip back into the dim. And with every step, I felt the distance between us shrink, not physically, but in the fragile, unspoken understanding that was slowly taking root. It wasn't planned. It wasn't wise. But walking there with her, under the hush of the night, it felt inevitable. We slowed as we reached a quieter stretch of street, where the hum of traffic faded and the glow of a single street light spilled across the sidewalk. The light softened her features, painting her in gold against the cool darkness. She stopped walking, her coat pulled close, and for a moment she just stood there, staring at the pavement as if gathering her thoughts. I waited. Finally she spoke, her voice low and careful. "You know this can't happen." The words weren't sharp, not a reprimand. They were softer, trembling at the edges. She lifted her eyes to mine, and I saw it there, not cold rejection, but fear. Fear of being seen differently, fear of what it might cost us both. "I can't." She hesitated, her lips pressing together before the words came out again. "I can't afford to be careless. People would talk. They'd judge. And I." Her voice faltered, and she looked away, blinking fast, like she was holding something back. "I don't want to care this much." Her honesty cut through me. She wasn't just my boss, not in that moment. She was a woman admitting how much it scared her to feel anything at all. I stepped a little closer, not enough to trap her, just enough so she knows she wasn't standing alone under that streetlight. "I've felt this for a long time," I admitted, my own voice unsteady. "I didn't say anything because I knew it would sound impossible. But tonight, I can't keep pretending. You're more than just someone I work for. You always have been. Her breath caught, almost like a gasp, but she didn't move away. Instead, her hand tightened slightly around the fabric of her coat, clutching it as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. The night around us seemed to fall silent, every sound muted by the weight of our words. The breeze rustled faintly in the trees nearby. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed, headlights gliding by, but here, in this pool of golden light, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us. She turned toward me again, her eyes glistening, the shield she wore in the office stripped away. You don't understand what you're risking, she whispered. I shook my head gently. I do. And I don't care. The words came out steady, certain. For the first time that night, I didn't feel like a younger man speaking to someone above me. I felt like myself, honest, unguarded, and standing equal with her in this fragile moment. Her lips parted as if to argue, but no sound followed. She looked at me, really looked, and I saw the conflict warring inside her. The careful professional who wanted to draw a line, and the woman who wanted to step across it. I lifted a hand slowly, giving her every chance to stop me. My fingers brushed lightly against her elbow, the touch small but grounding. She closed her eyes, just for a moment, and when they opened again, I saw her answer there. She was afraid. But she wasn't pulling away. And under that streetlight it was enough. The silence between us was fragile, stretched thin as glass. She hadn't moved away from my touch. Her arm was still beneath my fingertips, her gaze caught somewhere between resistance and surrender. I could feel her trembling, not visibly, but in the subtle way her breath hitched, in the faint unsteadiness of her posture. For a woman who commanded entire rooms with her voice, who stood tall in the face of endless demands, this vulnerability was something rare, almost sacred. Then, almost imperceptibly, she stepped forward. Her arms lifted, hesitating only for a heartbeat before sliding around my waist. I froze, hardly daring to breathe. Her cheek rested lightly against my chest, and in that instant, every wall she had built seemed to slip away. I closed my eyes, letting the reality of it sink in. Her weight against me was delicate yet grounding. I could feel the steady rise and fall of her breath, quick at first, then slowly matching the rhythm of mine. My hands moved on their own, one resting at the small of her back, the other brushing gently against her shoulder. The world narrowed down to sensation, the warmth of her body pressed close, the soft scent of her perfume lingering in the night air, the faint sound of her heartbeat against my chest. Each detail etched itself into me, unshakable. Either of us spoke. Words would have broken the spell. I thought of every moment I'd watched her from a distance, the way she walked into a meeting with unshakable poise, the way she masked exhaustion with a perfectly measured smile, the way she seemed untouchable. And here she was, not untouchable at all, but human. Holding on to me like she had wanted to for far longer than she'd ever admit. Her grip tightened slightly, almost imperceptibly, as though she feared I might slip away. I responded by pulling her closer, steady but gentle, silently promising I wasn't going anywhere. For a long moment, we just stood there, wrapped in the stillness of the night. The hum of the city faded into background noise, replaced by the quiet steadiness of two hearts learning to beat in unison. Finally, she pulled back, but only slightly. Her face tilted up, eyes searching mine with a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that she'd let herself give in, fear of what it meant now that she had. I brushed my thumb lightly across her arm, offering reassurance without words. The corner of her lips curved into the faintest smile, tentative, vulnerable, but so achingly real it made my chest tighten. "You don't make this easy," she whispered, almost like a confession. "I'm not trying to," I replied softly, and the honesty in my voice seemed to ease something in her. The distance between us remained small, charged, fragile. The embrace had changed everything. We both knew it. And as much as she wanted to believe we could step back, forget, pretend, her arms around me had already told the truth. Some lines, once crossed, cannot be erased. And tonight, under the quiet cover of the city, we had crossed one together. When she finally eased out of my arms, The night felt different, warmer somehow, though the air was still cool around us. She lingered close, her hands still resting against my sides as though she wasn't ready to let go completely. Her eyes lifted to mine, shining faintly under the streetlight. There was something fragile there, a quiet mix of relief and hesitation, like a woman caught between two truths, the life she'd built so carefully, and the one she suddenly realized she wanted. Her lips curved into a faint, almost self-conscious smile. "We said we'd forget this tomorrow?" I could hear the humor in her voice, but also the defense. A way to protect herself, to soften the vulnerability of what we'd just shared. I leaned down slightly, my voice steady but soft. "I told you, not a chance." Her breath caught, and for the first time that night she laughed. Not the polite, restrained sound I usually heard from her at work, but a genuine laugh, warm, unguarded, spilling out as if she couldn't hold it back. It was the kind of laugh that pulled at my chest, that made me want to keep saying things just to hear it again. When the sound faded, she shook her head lightly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You have no idea what you're doing to me," she whispered, half in wonder, half in warning. "I think I do," I said, smiling gently. We began walking again, but this time the silence wasn't heavy. It felt lighter, filled with the quiet thrum of something new between us. Our steps fell into an easy rhythm, shoulders brushing now and then. I noticed the way her hand occasionally swayed close to mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. For a few minutes, neither of us made the move. It was as if we were both savoring the tension, letting it stretch sweetly between us. Then, without looking at me, she shifted slightly closer. Her fingers brushed against mine once, then again, hesitant but deliberate. I turned my palm upward, offering silently. She hesitated for only a breath before her hand slipped into mine. Her fingers intertwined with mine slowly, almost cautiously, but once they did, she gave the slightest squeeze, small, but full of meaning. I glanced at her. Her eyes were forward, but the faintest smile tugged at her lips. The city hummed softly around us, headlights passing, voices drifting from distant corners, but in that moment, it all faded. What mattered was the warmth of her hand in mine, the unspoken promise carried in that single gesture. We didn't need to declare what this was or what it meant. The future was uncertain, and we both knew the risks. But we had stopped pretending. We had stopped hiding behind words like forget. Tonight was real. Tonight was ours. As we walked side by side, hand in hand, I realized something simple and undeniable: tomorrow could wait. Because tonight she was here. And that was enough.